Howdy, y'all. I'm Jace. Each week I come on and answer questions that people send in to me with regard to my life as a sex addict or a person in recovery or just somebody who is on a new journey learning about healthy sexuality and relationships for the first time. This week I got one in that I actually do get asked kind of regularly with people in recovery as well, and it's when do you tell someone in your life that you're a sex addict and how do you do it? A little bit of a caveat, I never advise anyone to go past their comfort zone. And there are risks with revealing this addiction. Unfortunately, it makes me very angry that that's the case, but for the time being, it is. There are implications that come along with being a sex addict, and they're not fair, but they're things that you need to be prepared for if you're considering being open with folks about this. Now, before I came out in the big way on the internet with you awesome people, I had already built up a base of support in my personal life. I had people in recovery who, of course, knew me and knew that I was going to be discussing this openly, and they were prepared to support me. I had told my mom. She knew for many months before I really started telling people. Some friends knew at that point. I told my sisters and their husbands as well. And I kind of just started telling the people closest to me what was going on, that I had been in recovery. I wasn't sober when I told my mom. I wouldn't be for months after, but I was trying. I was in recovery. And so then I came out to everyone else after I already had that support in my life. So that might be a little bit of a different situation. Maybe you're looking to tell a parent or looking to tell a friend. Everyone in my life knows. Friends, extended family, coworkers, employers. If you meet me, you know about it. I personally got to a point where I just felt very upset that I was putting so much work into my recovery and I was really transforming into a new person, and I wasn't able to discuss that with anybody. I couldn't tell anybody about it. It had to be this shameful secret that I was in recovery. That didn't seem right to me, and so I decided to just tell any and everyone I meet. Now, when I do that, meeting new people in my life in a personal setting, meeting a new friend, in a casual setting, not necessarily in a business setting, I do handle that differently. But when I'm just meeting people or wanting to tell people who are in my life, I discuss it just like I, say I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where I grew up, I work as an editor and as a producer. I'm a sex addict. I have 2 dogs. I really don't like to run. I just say it's a part of me. It's not who I am entirely, and it's not a bad decision I made or a lack of will that I am expressing there. Addiction is a disease. It's a brain disease. That's not my fault. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. They like to look at addicts as delinquents, perverts, troublemakers, weak-willed, that just scientifically, none of that's true. So for me, I am not ashamed of being an addict. I did not choose to be an addict, and I'm not going to hide it either. What I did choose was to be a recovering addict, and that's something I'm very proud of, and I do not hide that from people. That was a personal choice, and it was one I was able to back up with support and also with education. Once I knew I was going to start talking to people about this, I educated myself on addiction in general and sex addiction specifically, as well as recovery and the different methods and everything that looks like. That turned into the film, Suddenly Celibate, that we're making. And so my second piece of advice, so first, have some support already, whether that's in your recovery community or with close friends or family. Have the support already. Don't be out there by yourself. Maybe that's a spouse. Definitely have someone you can turn to when things get tough, because they very likely might. Second bit, educate yourself, because people are going to ask questions. They won't be mean questions necessarily, but every time I tell someone I'm a sex addict, only like 3 people have been like, oh, okay, it's hot out today, nice weather we're having. They just didn't ask anything. Most people kind of like, whoop, time out. Is that real? What does that mean? What does that entail? What does your recovery look like? They start asking questions, And it's important to be able to give accurate information, I think. Some of it's opinion stuff, but some of it is, the science of it, the brain part of it, how that works with chemicals, all of those things people are going to want to know. And I think once people do understand that it is a disease, per science, they are less rude or judgmental about it. And I mean, there's still a lot of people out there who don't recognize addiction as a serious problem in general, and they certainly don't recognize sex addiction as one. So don't be upset. It's ignorance. And I don't mean that in a mean way. Ignorance is just a lack of education in a certain subject. I'm ignorant in most subjects. A lot of us are. It's not a bad thing. They just have no education behind it, so of course it's a scary thing. So if you are going to start telling people, make sure you understand yourself, especially about your own self. I would definitely recommend doing that. The third thing that's really helped me is that I don't feel shame around it. So when I tell people, it's not apologetic. I don't tell them in an embarrassed way or that I'm doing a big reveal. I did in the beginning with some people because I didn't know how they were going to take it. But for the most part, I just state it, I own it. I did not choose to be a sex addict, but I did choose to be a recovering addict. And that is something I'm very proud of, and I will not hide. So anyone who comes across me knows that I'm a sex addict, they know I'm in recovery, and they know that that's not anything to be ashamed about. And I have not been treated in person with any disrespect as a result. And I think a lot of that does come with, if I were to be like, oh, I'm a sex addict, I know, then people are going to respond that way to me. When I just say it, that's part of me, moving on, or answer your questions, moving on, they see, oh, this is okay, this isn't something to be embarrassed about. You really have to portray what you want to get back. We get what we expect. So I don't go out there assuming people are going to judge me. And if they do, that's perfectly okay. I have so much love in my life. My life is so full that if somebody wants to hold my recovery against me, they are certainly welcome to not be in my life. They'll be happier, I'll be happier. Not a big deal. So how do I do it? Just like I tell people, I have 2 dogs. One's named Charlie, one's named Indiana. I'm a sex addict. Indiana's 5. Charlie's just turned 8. I don't pass, I just put it out there with everything else. When do I do that? That's really different for every situation. If I'm meeting somebody at a party, it's a little weirder for me because I do this, the film and everything I'm doing, and that takes up a lot of my time. And so, oh, you're doing a documentary film. What's your documentary film on? Boom, my life story is out there, right? Sometimes I just say, oh, I'm following a woman, blah, blah, blah. But if they're interested in all, they figure it out. Also, Google me. Like, all of the information about Jace Downey on the internet is that I'm a sex addict. So there's not much hiding it for me at this point. If I am meeting maybe, someone's family, or I'm in a job situation, it's not information I'll necessarily throw out right away. Now, that isn't because I think it's to be disrespected. It's because I've learned that I'm a lot more than a sex addict. That does make up a lot of my past, and it helped shape my character, both good and bad. So that is a huge part of me, but I'm a lot more, and the further I go in recovery, the more of my true self I become, and that's not my addict self. So when people are getting to know me for the first time and I anticipate having a long-term style relationship with them, it's not always the first piece of information that I give out, because I don't necessarily want that to be the only information they have. It is now part of me. It's not who I am entirely. So I do feel that out and make sure that they know me as Jace the person who's also an addict. If I think my favorite situation, I was going to lunch with a new person I had met, and I was, I have social anxiety, so talking to new people really stresses me out. Being around new people, sitting down across from one and having to have a conversation for an hour is very stressful. And so, my friend's like, you gotta go. And I'm like, do I have to go? Can I cancel? I'm like, can I be late? Can I, they're like, you gotta go. So I'm like, oh, what do I say? how do I approach this? What do I tell them? And so we sit down, we order, and then he says, oh, so what do you do? You're working on a film. No, I'm sorry, I Googled you. I know everything. I Googled you. I watched all of your stuff. I'm really sorry. And I was like, oh my God, what a relief. No reveal, like you already know it. Sometimes I want people can you just go Google me and then we can have a conversation afterwards if you still want to. But I would say, we are in a world that is becoming much more aware of addiction and much more comfortable with it. So I think the times are changing, and sex addiction is popping up more and more in pop culture, in the media. Different celebrities are talking about having this issue now. There are a lot more studies being done on it. It is coming to light, and that's going to happen a lot faster than other addictions, just based on all of the resources we have now, all of the information. The trends are kind of changing where recovery and addiction are not embarrassing things anymore. So I think it's going to become a lot easier to talk about this with people, and you'll be able to say, oh, hey, I have 6 months of sexual sobriety and recovery, and someone's going to give you a high five. They're not going to judge you for it. So that's the world I think we're moving towards, and it's one I hope we're moving towards. But if you're considering telling people about your addiction, have a support system already set up, because it can be scary, or just unsure. That's stressful. Can be for me. Know your stuff. Learn about addiction. Really be able to answer questions so that you can help break that ignorance that comes along with the other part of people not understanding and being disrespectful. And own it. If you're an addict, you're an addict. That comes from genetics as well as environment. It's usually coming from trauma that happened in childhood. None of that is my fault, and it very likely isn't your fault. So I'm done being ashamed of it, and I hope that everybody can get to a point where they're not ashamed of it either, especially if they're in recovery. That's an amazing thing. Recovery's been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I am damn proud of it. So I am not hiding it any longer. If you have any other questions on this topic, please feel free to email me. I'm not an expert by any means. This is just, the way I did it and my life out here. But I'm always happy to answer questions or, brainstorm some ideas, bounce some things off, whatever might be helpful. And if you have any other questions, any new ones, go ahead and send them on over. I can be reached through my website, www.suddenlycelibate.com. Until next week, I hope you'll stay curious.